Bartholomew Town.
Half Street Group brings a new generation's perspective to leadership communication, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience, message, and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Join me and Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea for a conversation every month about news of the day, the hottest media analysis, and a look behind the scenes at how impactful leaders drive conversations. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. All right, it is Inside Communications, our monthly conversation with Half Street Group founder and president Mike Rea. And we're kicking off 2025 with a conversation that applies all across the board, whether it's in your own organization, whether you're talking about it on a governmental level, on a global level, and that's thought leadership and really owning that space and that identity of thought leadership. Mike, I consider you a thought leader here in this market for sure. And
I appreciate that, Bill.
We got to get you like a sticker, like a Burger King crown that says thought leader that you can walk around with.
Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? If we just had every PR client in the state kind of going around with that. If someone told me I'm a thought leader.
That's it right there. So before we kind of get into the macro on this, we're coming off of, it's been now a week plus. So the news cycles have moved along, but the state of the state, and look, there's a lot of stuff that happened there, both in terms of the content of the speech and things that happened surrounding it. You can hear more about that wherever you're listening right now. I've given kind of a couple of different recaps myself, and some guests have offered their thoughts as well. But, you know, something that is really vital to all these types of presentations are the mechanics of it. And actually, you posted a LinkedIn article talking about really just owning the space of talking through the camera. And just from that standpoint alone, from a mechanical standpoint, your initial assessment of what we saw at the state of the state.
Sure. So I think that one of the big things, and so we have a couple of clients right now who are getting ready for big presentations that they're giving. Some of them are board presentations. One client's going to be doing a TED Talk in a couple of weeks. And what we're working with them on is helping them understand how to be able to communicate, not just to that audience that's right there in the room with them, but through to the medium of audience that might exist outside of that boardroom or outside of that theater, whether it's through a digital recording of it, whether it's through a live television feed, whether it's through a Zoom, if it's one of those type of board meetings. So I think that that's something that every communicator needs to be thinking about. And I think particularly, and we're in state of the state, state of the Commonwealth, state of the city season right now. Wes Moore gave his in Maryland. I know we always talk about Wes. I'm a Maryland transplant, so it's always kind of top of mind. You had Governor Healy give hers a couple of days after Governor McKee gave his here. So I think there's an opportunity for a lot of these elected officials and a lot of people who look at elected officials as kind of a model of what a public presentation can look like, to be thinking about how they are able to take their message beyond the room of legislators and stakeholders and insiders that might be in a state house chamber with them, and be able to bring others on board with it. And I think what we saw in Rhode Island, and I don't want to get into the stuff of barricades around the people's state of the state and some of the other kind of things that I think became a right focal point for media and activists and others to report on and make their voice heard on. But I do think that there was one thing that was just particularly head scratching a bit in terms of that presentation and the mechanics of it, to use your word. And that was the decision to not let the TV cameras from Channel 10 and 12 and 6 into the State House or into the House chamber, and only rely on the Capitol TV newsfeed for the speech. And it's befuddling because those of us in communications, those of us who have been around the State House, know that the worst camera in the state of Rhode Island is the mounted camera inside the House chamber. First off, it's not a high definition camera, or at least it doesn't project as a high definition camera. It's about 10 to 12 feet higher than the speaker is going to be. It doesn't have a zoom in, zoom out function, and it doesn't capture the essence of the room. When I was doing these for Gina Raimondo, I wrote 3 states of the state, and I orchestrated the mechanics of what the visual event was going to look like. we would never think about not inviting the talented and professional videographers from the 3 TV stations into the room, because we knew that they were a hell of a lot better at getting the shot than we were with the mounted equipment that was in the State House. So that one was just like odd to me, because the State of the State is such an opportunity to be able to speak beyond Joe Sicarci, Dominic Ruggiero, and everybody with a lobbyist badge that's allowed into the room that day, and be able to penetrate a conversation with a broader audience at home. And if you've got a camera that's looking down at you, even if you've got the mounted teleprompter, which the governor did, and I think he did a good job presenting the speech. I want to give him credit. I think that, albeit it was long, I think that it was it had a theme, it had the right touch points. It got very, very substantive compared to other speeches in the past, and I think he deserves credit for that. But you're giving a presentation to people at home, and you need to give and give account to that. And that's, like I said, that was the State of the State was not what prompted that piece of thought leadership or that blog post that I put together. It was actually our clients getting ready for some of their own presentations. But I think that a lot of the lessons that we try to share with our clients are things that elected officials, appointed officials who are giving those type of presentations can really be thinking about.
Yes. And of course, there's also the notion of on demand. I mean, the clip manufacturing that can come from a well shot and well lit and well presented piece of content, especially when it's from a third party, like a Channel 12 or Channel 10 or Channel 6, they create good looking pieces of content in short form that then are distributed over newscasts, distributed digitally, distributed on social. So you're able to speak to that broader audience in really kind of forever, but certainly in the days following the actual delivery of that performance, based on just the realities of how content is distributed and consumed. So you need to be thinking about the long game here. And it's going to be tough to chop up, like you say, an overhead camera from Capital TV and make it into quality Instagram content.
Right. Like that's like the whole thing. Like when you think about any of those like testimonial videos that often we'll see on corporate websites, or you'll even see that like sports teams will put them together when they're interviewing new players after they've signed them. They're almost universally filmed with 2 cameras. And the reason that you're filming with 2 cameras is so that you're able to give your editors easy transitions for when you want to cut out the ums and the ahs, or you want to be able to jump from one point to another without it looking like you're manufacturing or doctoring what that conversation looks like. And by just relying on that one, and again, let's call that Capital TV camera what it is. And the Capital TV crew does a great job of bringing Rhode Islanders into the workings of government, but they are not what I would refer to as kind of a world-class studio. When you've got guys like Johnny at Channel 12 who've won Emmys for the way that they're able to set up the videography, you should be relying on them and using them to be able to make sure that the room is captured the right way, that they're able to show what is that feeling of emotion and excitement of the crowd that's there, so that the audience that's right in front of you as a speaker becomes a conduit for the audience at home, which is the one that you're talking to. Again, remember, these are the things you are talking to those constituents at home. You are using the room that you're presenting in as a conduit to be able to get into other people. And if you look at, like, for all of the take the ideology, take the rhetoric, take the fear and the mongering out of it, Donald Trump does this really, really well. He knows how to use the audience that's there in the room with him and speak right through the camera to be able to make the audience that's watching on cable news or watching on their device or watching in the clips that are shared with them feel what that group that's in front of them, or feel something. It might not necessarily be trying to get them to feel exactly that. For people like me, he's trying to rile me up and make me feel a kind of rabbit hole reaction to it. But for his supporters, he's trying to get them to get that same feeling. And he does that really, really well. And I do think that there are things about that presentation that students of communications and students of rhetoric and students of oration should pay attention to. Barack Obama did it really well in another capacity, in that sense of he always knew where the camera was and he made eye contact with it when he was trying to make good points. He was able to go back and forth with the crowd with some of those casual asides when he heard the crowd yell something, whether it was a boo, and he would say, don't boo, vote. So knowing that the camera is the most important person in your audience when you're giving those presentations is such an important trait and such an important characteristic of any executive, any leader, any thought professional who wants to be able to build an executive communications profile.
Super well said. Excellent advice right there, and something that, especially in this era of, as we continue to see more and more AI content, the human that is able to cut through and actually deliver on an organic level, there's going to be a real differentiation between those who know how to use the tools in front of them and those who don't. And when we start talking about AI replacing human speakers at some point, well, it's going to be the person, the human being that, again, knows how to communicate through the lens, that is able to do what AI will never be able to do.
Right. And I agree with that completely. And I think that there is an importance of developing that kind of storytelling bravado, that and that confidence in projecting a narrative through the folks that are right in front of you to that audience at home, and giving audiences a reason to be able to share your content. And that's really what your job, when you're standing at a dais or you're standing at a teleprompter or you're giving a TED Talk or you're giving a board presentation, that's what you ultimately want to do. You want to turn the broadest possible audience that you possibly can into a medium that's sharing your content and the parts of your content and the parts of your message that are most relevant.
All right, let's go macro on this, and just in terms of thought leadership. It's a little bit of a buzzword.
It's a total buzzword. I kind of hate it, but I think we got to use it.
It can mean a lot of different things too. I mean, and it can be misapplied for sure. But when you think of that term, how small of an audience can thought leadership apply to? Is it something that an organization can have its own thought leaders? Do you think this has to be more across the board?
I think anybody can be, and again, I hate these buzzwords, but I think that we'll use the language that's typically used around this. I think anybody who has a perspective that is at least two of the following three: new, unique, or provocative. So anyone who's able to bring something new and unique or new and provocative to the table and get people to think about a trending topic in a different way, or with a new perspective, or with a new lens, is equipped to be able to hold that mantle of thought leadership. For organizations, where I think it's really important is, and I think, like, think about it just through this Rhode Island lens and kind of the nonprofit or social impact or public policy type clients that we work with, or if you're a corporation, the kind of community impact that you're trying to make. When you are embracing that kind of style of thought leadership, what you're doing and what your goal is that you're engaging an audience of opinion shapers and influencers to be able to make progress toward a goal, an initiative, or an agenda that your organization or you as a leader have put forward. You're not doing this thought leadership, and I think we'll get into some of the misconceptions, I hope, in some of this conversation, but the best thought leadership should never be something that is self-promotional. In all honesty, in many ways, the best thought leadership should only make passing reference to your organization's name or your organization's work, but instead should just show your authority, your credentials, your credibility toward a larger question or towards a larger challenge. And you want to be able to think about it. And what we coach our clients on is you want to be able to identify or create the stakes of what the challenge is or what the problem is. Offer a solution of some kind that's based on your expertise or your credibility or your lived experience or your organization's impact. And then be able to articulate to your audience what a measurable outcome of that solution would be. It can't just be something where you kind of throw out and say, all of this stuff is a mess. and then not offer any kind of solution, because then all you're doing is you're creating or you're exposing the problems that most people already recognize. You need to be able to raise the stakes, but you also need to be able to show what stakes are there to be able to meet that challenge.
Very interesting. Well, let's get right into that sort of the misconceptions piece right away, because I think it sets up a lot of important additional tributaries. Key misconceptions about thought leadership from your perspective.
Oh, man. I think one is, and we see this not necessarily with clients that we've been working with for a period of time, but a lot of times new clients who they'll say, I want an op-ed to be able to promote our fundraising campaign, or I want a get on a panel so that I can be able to talk about a new program that we're doing. Thought leadership isn't a press release. Thought leadership isn't an ad for your organization. Thought leadership needs to be something that is elevating or moving a conversation that's already happening or a topic that's already trending, the natural step further, or bringing it into a part of the conversation that's being overlooked. And that's why so much of it is and when you look at op-eds that get placed, so often it includes at the bottom the person's name and a little bit of their bio. And that's not there for kind of the smug reason of let everyone see what your title is. It's there because it allows you to be able to assert what your credibility is on it, and gives people kind of that sense of who's talking to me and why are they relevant on this topic, or why do they have a perspective that I should give a crap about? So that's, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions. I think one of the other misconceptions is that anybody is entitled to be able to have a place on the op-ed page or on the panel, or that anybody is able to put an opinion out there onto social media and that it will be met credibly, or it will be met with substance. As a thought leader, you have an obligation to routine or repetitively prove your credibility, prove your expertise, and prove the value that you bring to the conversation. And it's not a one and done. It's not like you do it once and that it's there forever. It's like consent. You need to continue. Consent needs to continue to be there. Credibility needs to continue to be there. And you need to, every step of the way, be able to show your audience why you deserve to have that seat at the table, why your expertise is different or new or unique or provocative from all of the other points of view that are out there. And then the last thing I would say on kind of a misconception around it is thought leadership can't just be an echo chamber of other things. Like, just because you are credible or just because you have a subject matter expertise doesn't mean you just get to raise your hand and say, me too, I think that also. You need to provide something that's different. You can't get into this sense, and it's on a strategic level too. What we work with our clients all the time is we look at the different Venn diagrams of where different topics are, and we try to look for those places that are close enough to that overlap section where there are a couple of different perspectives, but we try not to be in those sections exactly. We try to create a new area for overlap where people haven't necessarily been, or we try to carve out a portion of the conversation so that we don't get caught up in all of the noise of others. And I think you see a lot of that, like in the housing space right now. Like, we've worked with Crossroads for years, and what they've done a very good job with through their previous CEO and now with Michelle Wilcox in the role there is they provide a really crystal clear perspective that is focused on efficacy, that is focused on a urgent response to an immediate crisis, but also a long-term focus on the development of housing. And they're able to back it up with without necessarily advocate language, but with efficacy language. And that is something that is very different than what a lot of the other strong, able, good advocates are putting out there. But there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of them that are singing off of the same, or a lot of them that are using some of the same talking points. And it allows an organization like Crossroads to be able to differentiate in that, to be in a spotlight where they're able to bring new audiences and new voices into the conversation about housing. And that's what, in some ways, with thought leadership, it becomes a really impactful arm of coalition advocacy communications.
And that differentiation piece is so critical because, again, there's a lot of people who have a lot of great ideas about narrow and broad topics, but who's able to check two of those three boxes: new and
unique, provocative. Let's think about it. How boring is the Dan York show when every caller calls in and it's like, I agree with that caller right before me, and it's like and like, you guys can't do it. Like you can't control for that, obviously, but the that's like the fastest way, and that's why when you do see like the skilled moderators on these type of things, and in some ways in thought leadership, the moderator, if you're thinking about panels or you're thinking about the editors that are choosing what op-eds to becomes so important in this, in that they end up having to make these decisions of what is the new voice going to be, or what is the new perspective going to be, and that allows for enough of those key changes in the conversation so that general and broad audiences don't feel like they're just reading the same thing over and over, and it's just another kind of paint everybody with the same brush on any given topic. And it allows for folks to really be able to stand out and move a conversation to the next natural step.
In terms of this, kind of looking at it from your previous governmental experience, politicians and leaders at whatever level of government, they have an opportunity to be thought leaders themselves. They ought to be. Sometimes people go into viewing a politician with a bias or a preconceived notion that, well, they must naturally be lying to me. I mean, this is like a pollable fact that we've seen over and over again, trust in government. So just based on your governmental experience and political experience, how does a candidate or how does an elected official come across as an authentic thought leader and not just somebody spewing talking points?
Good question. It's harder now than it's ever been. And I think that I'll take this in a slightly different direction and maybe do a little bit of an autopsy on what the Democrats' message should be in the next 4 years, because I think that's kind of the area. Politicians, elected officials, appointed officials, they have an obligation to persuade people of what is the right course of direction for government. How should government be involved in their lives? What kind of programs should be equipped to be able to support that? But an effective message or the effective leaders, effective messengers, are ones that are not trying to win an academic argument. They're not trying to be right. They're trying to connect their values with the emotional perceptions that broad audiences or constituents have of their personal and family circumstances. And what I think we've seen in the last 3 years is that Democrats lost that. They lost in the 2024 election. The Democrats lost the emotional persuasion argument. They were not. They were too focused, in my view, on being right about the data, being academically correct about what the state of the economy was or wasn't. And which is why when we work with our clients on executive communications, on thought leadership, one of the first things I make sure to tell them is we're not going to start off any paragraph. We're not going to start off any stanza of a speech with a data point. You need to be able to give the anecdotes and be able to give the emotional connections and the stories that then put that data and those things in context. And if you're losing the emotional conversation on there, you're not going to be able to persuade people that your approach, that your ideology, that your rationale or theory of government is the one that is going to be the most impactful on their individual lives. So I think that's an area where elected officials, organized parties, appointed officials, the next chair of the DNC, they have an obligation in those type of environments to make sure that their thought leadership and make sure that their public personas, make sure that the public persuasion that they're doing is aligned emotionally with what people's perceptions are. and then get into using fact to be able to back it up, or use a policy argument of these are the things that we're going to be able to put in place to be able to do better by you in your life. So I think that's one of the key areas that politicians can do it. They shouldn't be worried about educating. They shouldn't be worried about explaining. Like we often say, and I think that this goes more in kind of like political communications and thought leadership, but the axiom holds: if you're explaining, you're losing. And you need to be able to connect at those places that people don't need to pull out an encyclopedia. They don't need to pull out the latest Bureau of Labor Statistics data to be able to understand the core points of what you're trying to argue.
Yeah, we find in political broadcasting, the wonkier you get, the more and more and more annoying the story becomes to both cover and to receive as a listener, reader, consumer. And sometimes you think, man, are we just dumbing this down? And it's like, no, people can only digest so much. We have to accept that reality.
Right. I mean, honestly, like these kind of academics and others that are involved in kind of the political messaging should really take a page out of Michael Lewis's book. Like, this is a guy who turned a Moneyball, one of the best sports books of the last quarter century, was about data and statistics, but it was the most amazing story of individuals and their new approach to baseball that I've read in years. Michael Lewis has done it for cryptocurrency. He's done it for an obscure offensive lineman position in football. He uses emotional storytelling to then be able to get deep into the weeds and be able to show, backed by data, backed by fact, of where else everything goes. If the Democratic Party could hire him as a consultant to figure out how the hell to tell a story that's able to resonate with people who want to hear a message that aligns with their perception and that they want to be able to see functioning government, they should do it in a heartbeat, and they should overpay for it.
Yes. And it's almost like this is a very bizarre analogy, talk about going inside, but it's almost like, speaking of the Oakland Athletics, it's instead of going with that emotional storytelling from the Moneyball standpoint, they almost went with like the Jose Canseco juiced standpoint, where it's just like, we're going to literally inflate issues to the point where you can't not notice them in the room. And those issues, whether they be social issues like, I don't know, it came up yesterday on the radio, the transports issue. I mean, it becomes so obvious, it becomes so provocative, it becomes so one-dimensional that you can't escape it. There's no hiding it, that's your identity now. And instead of being able to play to emotions, all people see is a hulking Jose Canseco of an issue, knowing that that's not natural and that's definitely not playing to my heartstrings.
Right. And that's like the name of the game when it comes down to all of this thought leadership stuff. And anybody, and again, I'll go back to kind of where we started on some of this. Anybody can be a thought leader if you're committing yourself to showing your expertise, picking a part of the conversation that you can provide a credible, new, unique, or provocative perspective on, and you're able to sustain a conversation around it beyond just a flash in the pan. But it comes down to being able to connect those things and create an interesting angle that audiences want to engage with. People don't like boring. People don't like the thing of everybody's doing a great job and should just keep doing what they're doing. Conflict, and this is like, when you think about message development, and we've talked about this to a degree over the course of the year that we've been doing this, a good message offers contrast. Doesn't mean it offers conflict. It doesn't mean you need to be opposed to another person or that you need to have a rival in the conversation. But that contrast is you're creating an opportunity that something sounds different, looks different, feels different for an audience. And if everything feels the same, or if everything is kind of has this same kind of tone to it, or has this kind of same jocular pat on the back to all of the same people that are always involved in this. And I think that in some ways, it's one of my frustrations within Rhode Island right now is I do feel like the thought leadership, or the opportunity for new thought leaders to be able to step into some of these things, is so watered down, because there's a tired trope oftentimes of, we need to use our op-ed page, or we need to use our letters to the editor, or we need to use our digital platforms to give everybody in the State House a pat on the back for doing the bare minimum. And I do think that our leaders in the State House are sophisticated enough, are adult enough, have enough thick skin that they can hear from their allies, you're doing a great job on these things, but you got to do more on these. And that's the kind of thought leadership, and that's the kind of lane and the kind of provocative perspective that individuals, organizations, coalitions can carve out. And in this current state of play, those are the things that are going to sound a little bit different. And those are the things where if you're working with a PR team, or if you're working with an outside agency, or you've got a communications person in your organization that you lean on for that, if they're not pushing you outside your comfort zone a little bit, if they're not pushing you to challenge others in pursuit and advancement of your agenda, you're not getting the best advice that you possibly can. Doesn't mean that every single time you've got to go around and throw a punch, or that you've got to be hypercritical of folks and be critical for the sake of being critical. But if you're not at least thinking, how can I push this conversation forward, or how can I make this proposal better by being able to show where it's going to, and lean into and find the emotional connection to that with broad audiences, you're getting bad advice from your PR team.
I'm so glad you said that, because I couldn't agree more. And that's something that I see in government right now, that we either have complete haters or we have complete admirers. And guess what? There needs to be conversations both inside the immediate rooms that governmental leaders occupy, but also external pressures need to be taken seriously. Now, of course, there are examples of this where it's just total nonsense. And like you say, it's just provocation for the sake of provocation. But there are thoughtful people that have opinions that differ from that which is happening inside any organization, but in this case, government. And guess what? That helps move the ball forward for everybody. It's not something that should be viewed exclusively as negativity.
Right. And the other thing too on it is, if you're thinking about this just through the pure lens of how do you use PR, how do you use public affairs to be able to drive what your legislative agenda is, or what your policy agenda is, you need to put outside pressure, and you need to be able to commit to some of that, because oftentimes, and I remember this from my time in Gina's office or in Governor Raimondo's office, we would often hear from the legislature, we would love to do that, but we need air cover. No one is talking about it. None of our constituents have raised it with us. We haven't seen anything on it. So it's your job, if this is part of your agenda, to go out and get public support, or build a public conversation around it, or steer the conversation that's happening into this lane. And if you're an organization that has the opportunity to lean into or step into a thought leadership space, if you're not using it to think strategically about how you're able to build that kind of external air cover, or build that kind of external, or raise the stakes for policymakers that they have to take action on those things that are important to you, you're just wasting the 700 words that the Boston Globe or the Providence Journal are giving you.
Exactly. It's where words go to die. Last question here. Your take. It's pretty obvious, but the difference between a thought leader and an influencer.
So that's that's actually a bigger question than I think you might have thought it was.
Uh-oh.
I think so. Influencer right now has become a little bit of it's a job in some ways that you like, an influencer is kind of responsible for curating and maintaining their own audience, building their own platform, and creating a content pipeline. Whereas a thought leader is someone who is kind of a part of a broader community or a part of a broader decision-making coalition in some ways, and they're steering a conversation or they're contributing to a conversation. I do think that there is some overlap in it though, because I think like when you think of like the word influencer right now, I think like the first thing that comes to people's mind is like Mr. Beast or Ian Brownhill more locally. And they're great. They make good content. They're intriguing. I think like particularly you look at Ian here, he contributes to thought leadership in some of his comical commentaries on the bridge or on weather patterns or on how Rhode Islanders drive or don't drive. It's like there's stuff that he's able to contribute there, but as an influencer, he's responsible for his audience. He is accountable to kind of the people who have subscribed to his page. Whereas a thought leader, they are, or thought leadership is looking to use some of the traditional and emerging platforms that don't belong directly to them.
Yeah. Completely agree with that 100%. And it's a weird thing because influencer is, it gets mistaken, or I should say anybody who has a platform can be perceived as an influencer, but you're right. We've gotten to a point now where it's a specific thing. It's more of a curator role, obviously content producer as well, but you're really targeting that narrow audience.
Right. And I think that will, and I was going to say, and I think that will evolve a little bit. Like, I think that job title maybe in 5 years will probably be more of a content owner or something along those lines. And as we move away from this idea of influencer, but it's a commoditized content that they are producing and that they are putting out there. Whereas I think the thought leadership that you and I have been talking about today is earned media through a different lens.
Yep. Absolutely. halfstreetgroup.com. Book a consultation. Get in touch with Mike and his team for your organization, for your business, whatever the case may be. Strategize and take it seriously, because guess what? This is where it's at right now in terms of 2025 moving forward. You need to have your messaging. You need to have your public relations image and everything that goes into that and everything that goes out of it in order. And Mike is one of the best in the business. Reach out, halfstreetgroup.com. As always, a pleasure, my friend.
Thanks so much, Bill. I'll see you next month.
Are you looking to advance in your career or explore a new field? The University of Rhode Island now offers a comprehensive portfolio of fully online programs designed to bring world-class education to you anytime, anywhere. Choose from a wide range of flexible, asynchronous programs in business and leadership, data, tech, and STEM, healthcare and pharmacy, marine and environmental science, and more. With expert faculty and innovative courses, you'll gain the skills and knowledge to thrive in today's competitive world. Are you ready to take the next step? Visit uri.edu/online and discover how URI Online can help you achieve your goals. URI Online, learn anywhere with us.